Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of Unpacking the Backpack. I'm recording from the beautiful Green Mountain State, Vermont. And this is a very exciting event for me because I was brought here by one of my former students who's now an administrator. So, really excited to work with educators in his district. But on today's episode, I want to talk about moving from we can't to how can we. No pain, no gain has been a common saying for years. Truth be told, getting better is really hard work, no matter the context. When faced with adversity, we take one of two paths. The first is seeing the inherent opportunity in a challenge through a growth mindset. Sometimes that means looking beyond traditional metrics of success to find other areas where the needle can be moved. Just because you're already good at something should not hinder progress in other areas. The second option is to develop a sense of reluctance to push forward. And this is all too familiar for many of us. Many factors, such as fear and comfort, can lead us in this direction. These can both stymie change efforts or develop an illusion that everything is just peachy. I decided to go with peachy because it's peach season in many parts of the United States right now. Truth be told, when it comes to education, there's no perfection, no matter where quantitative and qualitative metrics reside. Even if you have the best test scores, graduation rates, innovative practices, and attendance numbers, growth should still be pursued. Authentic leadership from your lens is being honest and vulnerable about where you are to help others get to where they need and want to be to succeed. Remember, leadership is about action, not position, title, or power. So you need to be true to yourself and others. When you fail, and you will, showcasing your vulnerable side will only help to strengthen the bonds with those you work with. Being human is more important than being right all the time. You will never have all the answers or solutions needed to move certain change efforts forward, and that's okay because you can look to others to find answers to questions and help you achieve your goals. Continue to improve in ways that push you outside your comfort zone. With authenticity by your side, finding success will be much easier. And it's a key to move from we can't to how can we. So, whether you lead a district, organization, school, or classroom, you should always strive to get better. There is always work to be done, and effective educators embrace this wholeheartedly. They live by the mantra, how can we? So I want you to consider these 5 questions when it comes to professional growth. Question 1, who do you serve? 2, why are our practices effective or not? 3, how can we improve? 4, what will tell us whether or not we are successful? And 5, where do we go from here? These questions set the stage for really highlighting a path to how can we as opposed to we can't. A standout example of a how can we mindset is a Quest Academy Junior High School in Utah. During the spring of 2022, I met Nicki Slaugh, who at the time served as principal. I also met many of her staff at a school system where we were all there to facilitate professional learning on personalized competency-based learning, PCBL. Then we all got to talking. And in typical fashion, I moved from ideas and concepts to concrete examples of evidence from my other coaching projects to illustrate practicality and efficacy. In Nikki's words, she saw many direct connections to what she and her staff were doing at Quest. But more importantly, she saw an opportunity to grow. It was this point that we planned longitudinal work over the course of the next couple of years, which included a book study where they used my own disruptive thinking in our classrooms. After several workshops, I began coaching cycles in the fall of 2022. What I immediately saw blew my mind, as it was some of the best examples of personalization at scale I have ever seen. And personalization, as I define it, is all students getting what they need, when and where they need it to learn. In every classroom, I saw evidence of a vibrant culture of learning and competency based strategies where students followed a unique path and worked at their own pace. Teachers were seen pulling students based on data for targeted support in small groups or individually in math and ELA. Rubrics were everywhere and accessible in Google Classroom. I also saw the consistent use of exit tickets and pathways to provide feedback. My brief summary does not do justice to what these teachers and their leader have accomplished. It was simply amazing. Nicki and her teachers embody a how can we mindset while shutting the door on the we can't mentality. After listening to what I described, you're probably wondering, why I was even supporting Quest. Amazing stuff. That's because they continue to ask the question, how can we? And this all ties directly to the focus of this podcast. Even though they were clicking on all cylinders in many areas, Nicki and her staff lived by the mantra that growth is a never-ending journey. And I'm talking past tense because Nicki has taken a new position at an innovative high school and also a director of personalized learning in a large school district in Utah. Let me get back to my point. Collectively, we came to the consensus that there were opportunities to grow in the use of high agency strategies, most notably voice and choice, as well as the development of customized support school-wide. Thus, we created a personalized coaching model to target those focus areas to answer the question, how can we? So much progress was made. While they already had a great deal of personalization in place, there was growth in areas of station rotation, flipped lessons, playlists, amplification of voice through technology, and the use of dry erase surfaces, increasing consistently rigor and relevance. The culture of learning that Nicki established at Quest really empowered teachers to take risks and actively reflect on their practice. After each coaching session, she took my feedback and then worked with her staff to pull out the most essential parts. Growth happened because Nicki and her teachers owned the process. They changed not because they necessarily had to, but because they wanted to in an effort to serve their students better. I was so impressed that I took my consulting team to the school to see firsthand what true personalization looks like. And then we put the finishing touches on our support model for districts and schools across the world. Nicki shared the following with me, and this is her quote. Quote, "To be the 1%, you need to do what 99% are either hesitant or unwilling to do. Our entire school culture is based on always reaching for better. We had already implemented several aspects of PCBL, but upon meeting with Eric, it was clear that we still had room for growth. While listening to Eric present, I felt he was my kindred spirit. I was so excited for us to meet someone who shared our passion and vision. We had already experienced how valuable feedback was in helping our students grow, so we are excited for the opportunity to receive feedback from an expert in the personalized learning field to help take us to the next level. The strategies Eric given my teachers were invaluable. He connected with both my students and staff and has generally become a part of our team," end quote. I share that quote because it embodies the how can we attitude and mindset. It all comes back to understanding that growth is the only path forward. And I want to share some actionable steps that you as educators can take to shift from a fixed mindset of we can't to a solutions oriented mindset of how can we, which is a critical transition for cultivating innovation, collaboration, and student success. Number one, you got to acknowledge the barrier and then reframe it. If you're a teacher, instead of I can't fit small group instruction into this time block, ask how can I restructure transitions or routines to make space for it? If you're a leader, instead of we can't implement coaching cycles this semester, reframe it to how can we embed shorter touch points that still support teacher growth? And a great action, practice reframing each we can't into a how might we question during faculty meetings, PLC, or common planning. Number two, embrace a culture of possibility thinking. If you're a teacher, be open to piloting a new strategy, tool, or structure, even if it's imperfect at first. If you're a leader, encourage experimentation over perfection. Make it safe to try, fail, and learn. A collective action could be highlighting bright spot stories regularly, where someone turned a barrier into a breakthrough. Three, build a safe space for creative problem solving. We can't often comes from fear of judgment or past failures. As teachers and leaders, use collaborative protocols like yes and or, and think about finding the whys to explore root causes and then to generate new solutions. So a collective action could be dedicating time in PLCs or staff meetings for challenge to opportunity discussions. Think about that. Challenge to opportunity. Moving from we can't to how can we. Number four, start small, stay consistent. As teachers, ask, what's one tweak I can try this week to better reach my students? Leaders, ask, what's one condition I can shift to better support teaching, pedagogy, learning? And a collective action could be using micro goals, tiny experiments with big learning potential to shift momentum. 5, cultivate collective efficacy. Believing in what's possible as a team unlocks innovation. Teachers share wins, strategies, and data to build trust and momentum. Leaders celebrate team efforts, create visibility for progress, and use evidence to inform next steps. And a great collective action, collectively, could be using walkthrough data, student work, or teacher-led showcases to affirm, we can do this. Here's the proof. As we think about mindset, I shared in Disruptive Thinking in our classroom that we often focus on the yeah buts. And the yeah buts basically are we can't. Yeah, but I don't have enough time. Yeah, but there's too many directives. Yeah, but we don't have money. Yeah, but these kids, can't focus. And again, the yeah buts morph into excuses. And I will tell you that, if it's important to you, you'll find a way. If not, you will make an excuse. So, as I talk about this shift from we can't to how can we, my point is as simple as it is proud. Growth can and be the only path forward, no matter where you are in your practice or as a system. Professional learning should be anything but cookie cutter and personalized based on needs and goals. But we have to see it that way. We have to have an open mind. We have to be driven by intrinsic factors as opposed to extrinsic. Learning and growth should be something you want to engage in, not viewed as another thing to do or a waste of time. If you want to really think about where you are, consider the questions that I started with. And those questions were, again, who do we serve? Why are our practice effective or not? How can we improve? What will tell us whether or not we are successful? Where do we go from here? Those set up the how can we. How can we focus on the small shifts to practice done consistently? How can we focus on not doing more work, but the right work? How can we focus on maximizing the time that we have? And a lot of the we can't mentality stems from time. Not enough time. Here's the thing, whether you are a teacher or administrator, time is not necessarily the problem. We have to be open and honest about how we leverage the time that we have available when students are with us. So we need to think about prep periods. Think about common planning. Think about PLCs, faculty meetings, professional learning. Think about the time that we have by contract and work to ask the question, how can we better maximize the time that we currently have? And maybe you start from there because, no one wants to reinvent the wheel. No one wants another thing. But the we can't, if we think that, we ultimately model that in subtle and not so subtle ways for our students. And when we do that, it can have a domino effect on their own morale to want to learn and even their own mindset. Students should never think that we can't learn or I can't learn, I can't do this. It's job of educators to help them understand, yes, you can, and here's how you can do it. So I will try to put those questions in the show notes. I always record these and then I listen afterwards after I've done everything, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I did not put that in the show notes. And if you have any suggestions on topics or ideas or concepts that you would like me to address in this podcast, please, by all means, shoot me an email, a tweet, an Insta message, because I'm always looking for things to explore into. And I got to get to the point where I start bringing guests. I think when I run out of content and ideas, that's when I'm going to start bringing guests in. But everybody, as always, thank you for listening here on Unpacking the Backpack. But most importantly, thank you all for what you do.